We will make a short traveling together with 7 stops. First, I will present my thesis. Second, I will present very shortly a lot of examples of digital erosion of truth and certainty. Third stop, testimony as truth practice. Then the fourth, our epistemic dependency, not autarky, epistemic dependency. Then we come to testimony as a medium, and then to trust. What is trust? Why is it necessary, even in epistemology? And my last point will be digital transformation of the public sphere. Here my initial idea. I tell it in German. Wenn wir über Fake News sprechen, dann geht es in Wahrheit um etwas anderes, um Vertrauen. When we talk about fake news, we are really talking about something different. Trust. That's a quote from Barbara Hans. She has been the chief editor of Spiegel Online, a very well-known, not paper, but a medium in Germany. Okay, now to my hypothesis. The digital erosion of truth is a decline in trust. To comprehend this connection, epistemology, ethics, and media theory have to be intertwined, have to be combined. But first, I would like to present some phenomena of digital erosion of truth in different respects. Yes, and I want to go through 3 different fields. First, up to public communication, fake news, deep fakes, filter bubbles, echo chambers. Then to science, only very short, an increase of black boxing. And then to everyday life, and you all know data abuse and digital disenfranchisement. First example. In addition to fake news, there are the deep fakes, which can use artificial intelligence procedures to produce high-resolution portrait images of non-existent people or remove objects in photos without a trace. And you see on the right side, it's a non-existing person. Well, and on the other side, you can do it in every day with your smartphone in the Photoshop software program, vanish, delete objects in a photo. And the viewer will not see any trace on the surface. Faking of photos in the GDR was very, usual. Here you see it's a historic photo, handshake of Wilhelm Pieck and Otto Grotewohl in 1946 at the founding of the SED in the GDR. In the original photo, Karl Müller, who is in between both heads, look at the first photo, was jailed by the Stasi in 1950 and is removed from the official photos. 2 things are important for me here. First, faking photos were common in communist regimes. Today, however, and this is at stake, this can be done simply by using apps for image editing. And second, it is precisely the modified photos that appeal to the idea to be a reflection of the real, and in this, or that sense, true. Next example, artificial intelligence-produced images, generated images. First slide on the left side, a portrait produced by an algorithm trained by 346 paintings attributed to Rembrandt or the Rembrandt School. And on the right side, you see the riding astronaut. The software, and you can get it, it is OpenAI software. The software DALL, or DALLE2, created a realistic image. Look at it, look at, oh, now look at it. I think perhaps it's not so very, I'm not so very intelligently situated. I'm standing. You don't tell me, you have to tell me. I have no eyes in my bag, but okay, but you see, it's in the completely realistic mode. But the point is that it is not programmed. The algorithm is not instructed by using formal language, but by natural language instruction. Everybody of you can do something like this without knowing anything on software languages. Well, now we are going, what to say, I told you very short traveling through all these examples. Now we are going to deep learning and black boxing. When using algorithms, the software produces an internal, when using learning algorithms, sorry, this is relevant, convolutional neural networks are used. When using these so-called self-learning algorithms, the software produces an internal model at its disposal after its training phase, which continues to modify with each use. The consequence of this is black boxing. The internal model can no longer be reconstructed from the output. The learned models remain hidden. The most innovative and effective applications of artificial intelligence are based on these so-called self-learning or not programmed algorithms, which are not explicitly programmed, but are trained to produce the desired output using huge amounts of data and statistical methods. Here, you have an example, a picture of such a model. It's only a picture, a very short picture. And what matters here is that the model is built in these hidden layers. And when in the final state, George Washington is correctly, more or less, identified from the input, you are not able, even if the creating engineer, to reconstruct the internal model. And therefore, so to say, this is a black box. Okay. And now going to everyday life. Customer data is used for advertising, marketing without the internet user's knowledge. We all know this. And only I want to remind you the example of Cambridge Analytica. They tried to influence voter behavior through individually configured and sent messages. We all know that the economic principle of exploiting user data is a characteristic feature of platforms and social media. Users sitting in front of the screen have no real control on the interaction of the algorithms, machines, protocols, and so on behind the screen. And now my last. This is the next slide, and this is the last slide with regard to my examples, digital disempowerment. All this converts into an experience of deprivation of individual digital capacity. The potential and creativity of web navigation become at the same time a form of disempowerment. Here I finished this overview of the digital subversion of truth and ask more fundamentally, what is truth? Three aspects. All forms of deformation or negation of truth, lie, error, fraud, deception, bear an implicit reference to truth. So do propaganda, ideology, and myth. Second, truth functions like an implicit standard, like a norm that remains latent in epistemic practices. The latency of truth matters for me. And the third aspect, there are a lot of aspects, only a selection of three. Yet the concept of truth is completely controversial in philosophy, and a universally valid definition does not exist, in my opinion. I do not want to go into the various definitions of truth here. In a remarkable way, the reference to truth seems to underlie our cognitive relation to the world, even in all its deformations and distortions, in a more or less intuitive way. Naturally, we implicitly assume a correspondence naturally, so to say, not in a philosophical, sophisticated manner, but naturally we assume a correspondence between what is said or shown and facts that exist in the world and are conceived or judged as real. Now, I'm going to testimony. A praxeological concept of truth, and this would be my, so to say, methodological attitude, not truth as a thing, an object, but as a diversity of practices. A praxeological concept of truth, there is not, once more again, the or a truth, but different practices of truth. And then the practice of witnessing, of testimony, is of special importance in everyday life as well as in science. The following considerations are based on a praxeological concept of truth. There is not, once more again, but it's important, the truth reified to a kind of entity. But there are different search movements in the tension between truth and error, the implicit criterion of which can be described as a search process, so to say, for truth, a search movement to find truth. In this context, testimony plays a special role as search movement. The reason is that in recognizing and getting informed, we are fundamentally dependent on ways of giving testimony to us from others. Now you see it's a step an argument. Now we are coming to the sociality of knowledge, and it's a quote. Knowledge is a collective good. We secure our knowledge by relying on other people, and it is inevitable that we are thereby make ourselves dependent on them. The relationships in which we possess knowledge have a moral character, and the word I use to denote this moral relationship is trust. It's a quote from Stephen Shaping. It's a well-known book on the social history of truth. once more again, to reflect on the sociality of cognition is to go back to the role of trust. We have to combine epistemology and ethics. This implies overcoming the individualistic cognitive program of the European Enlightenment. We have to overcome, I think I'm still in a standing position. Can you read it? Is it okay? Okay. I think I have doubts with regard to two lines in frontiers in philosophy. The one is the difference between ethics and epistemology. In my view, and Hegel was one of the first to recognize this, every getting knowledge presupposes acknowledgement. This is the first. We are dependent on what others have to tell us by word, by text, by pictures. This is, yes, no, I think I'll let it like this. It's enough. We will have it more clear because you see there is a critics on the European Enlightenment. The idea of knowing as doing yourself is very deeply founded in our philosophical tradition, so to say. And therefore now I want to explain what I mean with our epistemic dependency. Contrary to the individualistic idea of knowing by oneself, as articulated in the European Enlightenment, knowing and recognition is a collaborative, a social process in everyday life as well as in science. In emancipating from political dependence and ecclesiastical authority, Immanuel Kant called for the courage to make use of one's own intellect. But we know today that the idea of self-sufficiency in thinking neither corresponds to the human condition in general, nor to the conditions of scientific and even of everyday informing procedures. But before we can find the connection between knowledge and trust, we have to be aware what trust means. And here is my question with regard to trust. How to substantiate and justify the connection between truth, knowledge, and trust? Our answer is by epistemic testimony. The witness is a medium to produce new knowledge for the audience. In everyday life, but also in science, we have to rely on what others transmit to us in speech, writing, and images. Philosophers like to define truth as justified true belief. But how much of what we really know are we able to prove and self-justify? It is astonishingly little. It begins elementarily with our birth date, continues with language acquisition and school socialization, includes day-to-day information, and culminates in the academic knowledge practices. We rely on what we learn mostly on a very, very big part second-hand. We are epistemically dependent beings. Knowledge transmitted through testimony is an irreplaceable dimension of our knowledge cultures. The phenomenon of testimony is multifaced within the triad between dramatic survival witness, you think of Holocaust witness, juridical testimony in court, and every day being informed by the telling of others. our dependence on being informed by others. We can compare this on the one side with the dramatic, so to say, bearing witness. This is the Holocaust witness, the survivor witness. And on the other side, we have a prosaic, a weak version of testimony, which nevertheless underlies all our knowledge practices. You see, I'm in the following only focusing myself on this everyday testimony, not on the survivor witnessing and not on the juridical witnessing in court, but on the everyday telling, but being instructed by others. And now to testimony as a medium. Here is a quote first. A witness is a paradigm case of a medium. That is a quote by the Canadian J.D. Peters. I have examined the witness as a central figure of knowledge transmission and knowledge generation in my book Medium Bote, Übertragung, kleine Metaphysik der Medialität, which is now also available thanks to Federica in Italian. Here you have some covers of this book. There's a Japanese and an English version too. But now to the problem of giving testimony and truth and trust. To bear witness means to report facts or events which are beyond the reach of the audience. To testify does not mean to prove. A testimony does not create evidence. We can debate on this, but this is the credo. There is no evidence, otherwise testimony is not necessary. Testimony is necessary if there is no evidence in a knowledge situation. To testify, this is a quote from Jacques Derrida, to testify is transverse to giving evidence. We have to reflect if there is a kind of knowledge without evidence. This is a provocative question. To bear witness is only necessary, once more again, for situations of uncertainty and not knowing. Testimonies communicate facts or events which are in principle withdrawn from the listener. But why then can the testified communication produce new knowledge for the hearers at all? This is the fundamental question. To anticipate the answer, this is only possible because in the act of testifying, a social relation between witnesses and listeners emerge, for which trust is fundamental. Giving testimony, bearing witness, is a social relation, so to say. It is not an individualistic act of speaking something, but speaking to somebody, and so on and so on. We will see that. This is the question, and here a solution. A form of social interaction arises between the witnesses and the audience. What a witness says is not an assertion, but an assurance. That is the willingness to guarantee what is told. This difference between assertion and assurance, as so to say, a speech or communicative act, is relevant. On the part of the audience, this means trusting the witnesses by recognizing them as credible and responsible. And now, thus, testifying does not remain a pure transmission of information, but becomes the emergence of new knowledge on part of the auditorium. A witness can give rise to new knowledge with her or his testimony precisely because what she or he says is not to be understood as a proposition. Rather, the witness assumes the guarantee and responsibility that what she or he tells is truthful speech. This is possible if the listener recognize the witness credibility and trustworthiness. The witness gives responsibility. The audience gives trust. In the interaction of both roles, the witness telling creates new knowledge on part of the audience. So. Now, we want to clarify, you see a big picture, yes, but it's necessary. We want to clarify what is trust. And yes, look at the following. There are different instances of testimony. Persons, organizations, and institutions. Thus, there also are different modes of trust. First, I would speak about self-confidence, but I will not speak about that any longer. Look at the following three. There is personal trust, trust in another person. There is organizational trust in certificates, diplomas, and so on and so on. And there is systemic social trust in traffic rules, in money, in election results, and so on and so on. And do not forget, and here comes the question of power, the question, who is trustworthy, always involves conditions of power, politics, money, ethnicity, and gender. Usually, we trust those who are most like us, who are similar to us. To summarize these last points, social epistemology, by virtue of our epistemic dependency, is of a fundamentally ethical signature. Cognition and knowledge presuppose the recognition of others. No cognition without recognition of others. Episteme and ethics intertwine. If second-hand knowledge is ubiquitous, then trust is foundational to our epistemic practices. We now move to the problem of digitalization, focusing on the role of mass media and public communication and their changes under the conditions of digitization. Oh, I've lost this time. I hope there is still time. It's okay. Okay. Now to the print culture and to the digital media. First, a supposition. The mass media of print culture, as we know, classical newspaper, radio, television, shaping the space of public communication, usually in a way that they have respective programmatic orientation. From this point of view, they are a distant echo of the role of testimony insofar as they are responsible for what they communicate. Two ideas are at stake in this description of the Gutenberg galaxis, so to say. The classical mass media can be viewed in analogy to testimonial, to a kind of testimonial communication. And second, these mass media, in which one broadcasts to many, as we all know, offer a kind of credibility and trustworthiness for recipients through their specific social and political orientation, insofar as their messages are contoured by their programmatic framework. But now to digital transformation of public the public space of communication. The linear communication of the mass media public sphere has been transformed into, we all know that, a networked space of communicating. Its specific feature is decentralized and at the same time interactive communication. Everyone is not only a receiver, but also a sender, doing YouTube videos, doing blogs, and so on and so on. Social media and platforms are the typical media for digital public communication. They are, so to say, in the core of what is the public space of communication under digitality. And it is precisely for these platforms that Jürgen Habermas recently made a significant observation. Here is a quote from Jürgen Habermas. It's in German, and yes, I have translated it. I read it in English. It's a little bit perverse. For the media structure of the public sphere, this platform character is what is actually new. For in so doing, the platforms dispense with that productive role of journalistic mediation and shaping of programs which the old media perform. The new media offer potential users the unlimited digital networking possibilities, and this is a very interesting expression, like blank tablets, wie leere Schrifttafeln, for their own communicative content. That's to Jürgen Habermas, and at the same time, Habermas emphasizes that the platform economy aims at, we all know that too, aims at profitable commercialization of the very data that form the traces of the user's net behavior. Attention becomes the universal currency that dominates the regime of network news. In this regime, bad news, fake news, conspiracy theories, as well as expressions of hate, always receive the most attention. Now, a second quote from Jürgen Habermas. Here you have it in German, the original. I give you the translation. The platforms are not responsible for their own programs, like the classical news services or publishers, like the press, radio, or television. This is Habermas' diagnosis. They don't produce, they don't edit, and they don't segregate. But by acting as irresponsible intermediaries in the global network to create new connections, they profoundly change the character of public communication itself. In this platform economy, all the phenomena that we characterized at the beginning as the digital erosion of truth are promoted and not inhibited. And now I come to my last slide, to my last word within this official speech talk. Decline of truth in rational debates culture. In the course of the economic exploitation of user data as a side effect of the self-neutralization of the platforms, that is an interesting thing, self-neutralization of the platform, an erosion of the rational cultures of debate is taking place, a disruptive distortion of public communication. And here are only some phenomena. Meaning is displaced by attention, news degenerates into entertainment. Relevance as a criterion of news is lost. Affective charging of information, emotions take it all. And last not least, personalization of substantive issues. And this is the end. At the moment, I will not conclude anything. I think I have shown you only in a very small section that is public communication, how digitization changes the conditions of trust and trustworthiness. And now we should debate and first listen to Federica's talk. Please, Federica, come here.